This module on alerting, part of the AiMTT program. And today's learning objectives for this module are to create a meaningful alert from real-time data and to gain some knowledge on how to create meaningful alerts with stakeholders. So we're walking you through some of the steps we used also for SAIL 2025 to do this. One of the things that is very important to have in the background as a bit of knowledge is to have a digital twin or a common operational picture be a representation of a real world object, area, or event, and it's a digital version of that. And alerts in such an environment can help to make the things you want to stand out for your crowd manager be very actionable. And alerts are something that allows you to move the digital representation beyond just simply mimicking the real world, but actually adding value by giving information insights that can help you take action in the real world. And simulation can be a part of that, which we cover in another topic. Predictions as well, and alerting is something we will dive into in this section. And to start, what is an alert? An alert is actually a precautionary measure to inform people of a possible threat or hazardous situation. And the warning is something that you can also say, alert, warning, is it the same? Not quite. A warning is a message with higher urgency, identifying an immediate danger. So an alert can be in a stage where we're ahead of the actual risk. It's not necessarily something we have to warn the general public about, but it's something that makes us mindful and allows us to prepare for a risk so that we can evaluate it. And warnings require immediate follow-up. So a warning is a level above an alert. You could do both, but if you're actually sending a warning, then it means do something now. So a warning will actually, for example, when you're driving a car, some of the cars give a warning when you're too close to another vehicle, and they give you a collision warning. That's something that you should respond to immediately, but also here it can be triggered too sensitive, so it could sometimes lead to some irritation where you, as a driver, say, "Oh, there's going on. This could have been an alert." So there's always a bit of tension between when to actually use a warning and when to use an alert. For this section, we're going to be using alert because alert should not lead to panic or to immediate responses always, but should lead to increased attention and situational awareness, and they're part of decision support. So the people, the crowd managers and other stakeholders involved, they want to have situational awareness, and alerts are meant to draw their attention to situations that are developing that are not at this point posing a direct hazard or risk, or, well, potentially a risk, but it's not to the point where that's already happening. It's not a problem right now. It's a developing situation that could become a problem, but ideally something that you could step into if need be and avoid the situation altogether. And why are alerts valuable? Well, there are two things that are very relevant here. If you have automatic alerts based on data feeds, then those will never tire. They will always be watchful for your potential developing risk, and they will always give you that signal, hey, pay attention, something is going on. And if you don't have like these scheduled alerts, then you would rely on people continuously watching and being vigilant. And as an event grows longer, or people are tired, or there are too few people, then the chances of missing something are larger. So automation will help you. And another important aspect is the timeliness. If a well-set alert gives you valuable time to take a remediating action, you will prevent a risk becoming an incident that would require a warning message. So they help you to oversee a larger area without needing to upscale personnel. They give you that proactiveness if they're set well, and they never grow tired. So this is something that makes it valuable for a crowd manager. And some examples of that can be heat stress warning, giving precise indications of where something, where the temperature is rising too much, which would allow you to supply water and shading, or in a specific situation, for example, with a sport event, might even make you cancel it, or planned activities that are too intensive. Another example would be a level of service alert for crowding in front of a festival stage, that you would at some point say no more visitors into the area, only allow exits. And if you do it timely enough, then nobody would even experience a problem. You would just peak shave the crowdedness by acting in time. When is an alert meaningful? Well, at the heart of it, it's a detection of something that is crossing a threshold. And in order to do that, you need to determine when is it a problem, or when should I be alerted to it because it might become a problem. So setting a threshold is one of the most important things. And then the automated detection of a value exceeding the threshold, that's from that point onwards, most of the time, that's not the hard part. The hard part is just coming up with the right indicators and the right thresholds. We will get to that in a couple of the next slides, and walk through the steps you need to take. And the goal of an alert is to inform. It's decision support. It's most of the time it's not automated action. It can be in some cases if an alert is so. If, for example, an alert would be based on sensory information that would always require a certain response, that there would be no additional value of having a person in between to judge whether or not it would be necessary, then you could automate it. But most of the time, alerts are decision support. A person is in charge. He or she makes the decision whether or not to do something about it. But in terms of time, it's not already happening. It's about to happen, giving time to respond, and giving you the ability as a crowd manager to be preemptive, giving as little discomfort to your visitors as possible. And it all starts with identifying risks. And you can come up with multiple risks based on different aspects of an event, such as the flow of your visitors through an area, weather conditions that might become a risk, power supply, the availability or other vital infrastructure that you would want to monitor to make sure it's not disrupted. Think of, for example, on a music festival, your access to the power and the correct working of the stage and the speakers is vital to the experience. You could also monitor your availability or capacity of personnel, especially for safety and health services, that they are able to respond in time should an incident occur, that your placement of your people is always sufficient. Fire hazards or other evacuation scenarios could be potential risks. And you could have all sorts of behavior-related risks, such as potential for brawls, demonstrations, or acts of violence, and many more, of course. But you start with identifying a risk, and then the next step to getting to your alert is to take that risk and see if you can actually measure it. Can we have data sources to make sure that we have a measurement on how this risk is developing? And for example, if we think a certain area might overcrowd, how can we automatically keep track of the current state of crowdedness? For example, we could use CCTV, we could use a drone, we could use ticketing data, we could use multiple sources of data to monitor such an event. And to make sure that we have data available to match with the risk, it's sort of like the prerequisite to see if we can make an alert. And if you're making a strategic crowd management plan, this would be the part where you actually have a measurement plan, a strategic crowd measurement plan. How are we going to measure the risks? How are we going to make sure that we can actually monitor the situation as it proceeds? And that can be a mix of automated data sources that are already present, or things that you could place with new sensors. And it could also be some human intel that could be logged into an app or other thing that to make it data. But multiple data sources could be used to actually measure one type of risk, because usually data sources are in themselves biased or incomplete, and combination of data sources tend to help to get a more realistic and holistic image of what you're trying to actually measure. If you're able to gather measurements, then you will still need an indicator. So having a potential risk and being able to have data, there's still a need to make an indicator. For example, again with the crowdedness, how could we express the state of crowdedness in an area? Well, at that point we have indicators like a flow rate, a density, a mood, a direction, things like that would be. And direction being context information we would need to interpret the other three I just mentioned. But we would want to have these things available, and we would want to turn them into indicators to be able to say something about a certain area. And if you add an indicator and of course communicate that indicator with everybody involved, then you're adding value to the rough data, because you're using the indicator as a means of saying when is the data useful. Well, we want to know something about the flow rate, because we have certain areas where we want the flow rate to be very high, and if we can measure that the flow rate is decreasing, that might be something that we would want to remedy. So then we would start asking people to move along or do some other kind of intervention to avoid such a passage area from crowding up. Other areas would be very normal for us to have a very low flow rate, because that would be viewing areas where people would stand and watch, which would be fine. But for example, in that area, we would still be okay with it as long as the density was below a certain level and the mood was good. If one of those two would change, we might want to again take action. So this starts to add some actionability to the data. It allows you to have a sense of what we would want to achieve, and that brings it closer to what you would want to do as a crowd manager. Otherwise, there's a large gap between the data and your intent. If you have the indicator, you're still not there. We still need a threshold. We need to distinguish when is it okay and when is it starting to become worrisome, and from which point onwards would we want to get that alert to be able to assess the situation. And setting that threshold makes it an alert. Otherwise, it's just a live data feed where somebody still has to look at the screen, monitor the values, and then do something. The alert, that gives you that automated signal, like, look here. If you're not setting the threshold, you're not having the alert do the work for you. The alert should, at that point, should be allowing you to divide your time to be able to watch other things, and the alert will kick in when it's needed. If it's done like that, an alert can be very good at decreasing the cognitive load and just alerting you or informing you at the right time. So again, with the overcrowding as the example, if we think it's a risk, then when is the area overcrowded? What's the problem? When do we think that it's wrong? Well, for example, if we're setting a level of service and we're reaching a capacity threshold. And it shouldn't be 100 because then we're too late, but it could be 90 or 80 even, depending on the time for our interventions to take effect. And at that point, if we can measure that, if we can give that alert, that would be useful. And picking the right indicator is very important, and setting it with a good threshold makes it valuable. So good practices for crowd management are, for example, the level of service for measuring the state of crowdedness in a specific area. And for example, for the way the human body experiences heat, we have indicators like the wet bulb globe temperature index, which is more informative than just the regular temperature. The regular weather conditions in themselves are not so good at describing the risks for people suffering heat stress, overheating. And for example, if you were organizing a marathon, then at this point you would definitely want to have the wet bulb globe temperature index to protect your participating athletes, rather than just look at the temperature itself, because it would be poor indicator to actually measure the risk you're trying to prevent, namely people becoming unwell or sick. And then the other indicator would be far more spot on for actually monitoring what you want to monitor. So picking the right indicator, also the threshold that would match the indicator, and setting that and programming your alert on that will be very useful in making alerts work for you. There are different types of thresholds you could configure, and you could have it as a static value, like if a value goes above X, flag as an alert. That's a simple, most easy way of thinking of a threshold. But you could also have more complex thresholds, for example, calculated values derived over a longer period of time during multiple measurements. For example, if we think an area is exceeding its level of service capacity of 90%, but for more than 5 minutes in a row, then we flag it, because otherwise the situation might already be solved, having solved itself, because people would walk in and walk out. But let's say it lasted for more than 5 minutes. Well, then we might need to nudge it a bit. So then we would want the alert. Otherwise, we would have too many false positives. Then we will be over alerting too much. What is also a very useful application of artificial intelligence is to have anomaly detection. And anomaly detection is based on having a normal state for your data for a certain type of indicator, and then being able to flag measured values that are significantly different from the previous measurements. And then at that point, the anomaly detection would basically tell you something is happening that is not expected. And that could also be that if you have a longer period of time of history, that you would have certain moments, like for example your Tuesday mornings, and they would always have a certain level of crowdedness, and hey, now it's very different. That would be something that would then be flagged by the AI as an anomaly, something that would be different than the normal state of things. And one of the advantages of such flagging based on AI can also be that it does not require upfront knowledge of what will be remarkable or what will happen exactly. It will just tell you this is different than what I've seen before. A downside can be that it can sometimes be a bit unfocused, or be like, yeah, but of course this data is different because logical explanation, and the crowd manager might look at it and be like, why am I getting this alert now? Because it's obvious that we're hosting an event. So of course the data is different than on a regular Tuesday morning. So always think of what kind of threshold would be applicable, and it's always a question of just creating a threshold in a way that what you're actually delivering is relevant. And at that point, that's then the over and under alerting comes in. It really depends on your use case, what you're doing, because if you're over alerting, you're giving alerts, but no action is needed. If you're doing that a lot, then people will stop looking at the alerts because they will be like, yeah, whatever. They're not relevant. They're just consuming my time and it's not worth it. If you're under alerting, then you're missing things. You're not giving an alert while you should be giving an alert. And depending on what you're measuring or what you're doing, you might want to focus more on the one or on the other. If you're monitoring something that is vital, that is crucial, that if it goes wrong once, it's a huge risk. For example, the example for the music festival, if you're monitoring the power supply, and if you think one of the main components might be overheating, you might want to give that warning, even if you're wrong, because checking it once too many, not so much of a problem. Not checking it once while it was overheating might be a huge problem. So at that point, you would be okay with over alerting, because that would give you a safety margin. In other cases, you would be more cautious and you would be sticking more on the safer side of things, where you would say, this is not a crucial alert, it's a useful alert, but not a crucial alert. Let's give it when we're sure. That might be sometimes a bit late, but that will prevent us from giving a lot of alerts that are in the end useless. And then the alerts we do give get much better follow-up from our end users. And your end users, the crowd managers, the people doing something with these alerts, they are also a large part of setting these thresholds correctly. Because if you involve them in this thought process, and if they say, I'd rather have one too many than one too few, then there will be some acceptance and tolerance also if they get one too many. So that will help. So thinking with your end users on how to do this, and then if need be, test and recalibrate is a large part of making this work. The visualization is, of course, what makes it accessible to your end users, and it can be very different. It can be a dashboard, can be a 2D map, can even be a push message to a handheld device with a specific warning or instruction. Can be many things, but your visualization is bringing your signal to your end user, and it should be clear and concise. It should be obvious what you're trying to tell the user, and where is it happening, what is happening, and they should be able to assess your alert easily, and from that decide on whether they would want to do something about it, or maybe switch to CCTV to check the area to gather more information, to see if if the alert is correct, and then perhaps give instructions to people on site to step in. And the information itself, also with alerts and all sorts of visualizations, is all about making sure that you provide relevant information, not just a lot, not just hitting your crowd manager with alert after alert, and then it becomes an information overload, but rather focus on situations that are actually worth investigating, worth looking at, with the right thresholds, so that it provides overview, less information overload, rather focus on what's really important, helps direct the eye to the areas that require attention, and gives you a tactical overview. And then it helps you to cut through the noise of information overload of all different parties involved and giving a lot of information, but rather just cutting to the things that need monitoring or things that might be relevant. Last but not least, your alert can be well thought of, measured, threshold set correct, but still you need to see it in practice, and you need to have that validation and feedback loop with your actual users to see if they understand the alert, if they think the alert is triggering at the right time and place, and if there's actionable something they can do with it. Because if the alert is not actionable in any way, then perhaps you're directing it at the wrong audience, or you're measuring something that is in the end not relevant enough. So there's something wrong there. And if necessary, go back to earlier steps of your design process and make your changes, because in the end, the goal of the alert is to make sure that the event will be safe and smooth. And if these alerts are doing their job well, then they're allowing the crowd manager to be more proactive, and that will give them more a better position to make the right decisions in time. And if they're not contributing to that, well, then maybe the idea was good, but the execution simply isn't possible or unsuccessful. And that is something that you should always be willing to acknowledge and learn from. But if it does work, then that automation might be the additional pair of eyes or the additional virtual staff that the crowd manager was otherwise lacking, and it can be a great contribution to the event. To conclude, alerts are based on indicators of risk for an event or other crowd management situation, and they can help you take precautionary action if you're a crowd manager based on detecting occurring risks in time. They are set off by thresholds that are being exceeded by the values of the data, and setting up data-driven alerts can be part of your event preparation and part of your strategic crowd management and measurement plan, allowing you to have that advantage during the actual monitoring of the event. Picking the right visualization is, of course, very important to getting your message across and making sure that you can make the right follow-up actions from the alert. And you want to limit the amount of alerts you're sending to your end users to be only relevant alerts to prevent information overload. And by testing that with your end users and to create feedback loops, you stand a lot better chance of creating meaningful information alerts that will actually add value to your event. And with that, we're closing off this module. Thank you for watching.